اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله، يا إمام الرحمة، يا شفيع الأمة، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين، يا علي بن أبي طالب، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد، يا قرة عين الرسول، يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله، اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي، أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي، أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين، يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي، أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا إبراهيم يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي يا ابن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. Ask for your hajat from Allah. يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله، وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله، فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله، فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله، وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله، فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله، صلى الله عليهم أجمعين، ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين، آمين رب العالمين. الله لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات فاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل. Tuesday night program, Dua Tawassul, followed by a brief Tafsir. Inshallah, tonight, continuing with the sequence of the surahs that we've been discussing, we will talk about Tafsir of Surah Ghashiyah, which is in the order number 88. If you remember last time around, we talked about Surah Ala, which is chapter number 87. This chapter number 88, Surah Ghashiyah, begins differently as many of the 30th Juz chapters. Many of the 30th Juz chapters began with some sort of qasam and some sort of oath taken by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas we see that this surah does not begin with any sort of qasam, nor are there any oaths that are taken throughout the chapter either. So slightly different than the other surahs in the 30th Juz. It begins by asking this question, Hal ataka hadithul ghashiyah. Have you heard the story of the overwhelming day? So the word Ghashiyah refers to that day which is overwhelming. The word Ghashiyah comes from Ghasha, which means to overlap or envelope something or to conceal something or to hide something. And I'll tell you why it is one of the names of Qayamat. On that day, the faces of some people will be humbly cast down, troubled and tired as a result of their deeds in the past. They will suffer the heart. The discussion then takes a turn. After speaking about Qayamat, it shows is a picture of what is to take place on that day, how people will be treated on that day. The rest of the discussion is in line with the 30th juz chapters, which is primarily about Ma'ad. But the beginning of the chapter is slightly different, that we were accustomed to seeing what? We were accustomed to seeing that the surah begins with some sort of qasam or some sort of oath taken by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the word Ghashiyah literally means to conceal something by covering it completely. And that's why I said by enveloping something. In terminology, it means the event of Qayamat, as the name refers to that, will cover and conceal everything beneath itself. So when Qayamat takes place, everything will be covered by it. Everything will be under that Qayamat, meaning nobody will be spared, right? When Qayamat takes place, it's not like some people say, well, it's not Qayamat for us yet. We're not bound to go right now. We're going to go next week, for example. No, when Qayamat happens, it happens for everyone at the same time. We won't have choice. We won't have any say in this matter. So everything will perish, as the ayat of Quran says, Kullu shayin halik illa wajha. Everything will cease to exist. All the events that are associated with the Day of Judgment will take place, and it's inevitable. So from that aspect, in terminology, it means the event of Qayamat will cover and conceal everything beneath it. The second ayah talks about the word amila, means worn out due to labor. That people striving and working, they will be worn out. Nasiba means tired due to striving hard. Then you have hamiya, which means something which is really, really hot. Aniya means fiercely boiling. Dari', according to Prophet's tradition, it is similar to sharp thorns, with a bad smell and hotter than fire. All of these things remind you of what? Jahannam. So all of these things have to do something with Jahannam. Well, you got hot water, boiling water, fiercely boiling water. You got fire. You got all of these things that are associated with Jahannam. And then it's called Dari', this sharp thorns with bad smell, hotter than fire. It is called Dari' because after consuming it, insan would plead in humility with tadarru, right? Tadarru comes from the same root, Dari'. That's why it's called Dari', because it's going to bring out the cry and the weeping and the wailing of mankind. So of course, as we mentioned before, our tafsir is wholesome. It's not specifically after one ayat after another ayah. Rather, we talk about the entire surah as a summary of the entire surah. So the objective is that when you step out of here tonight, or those who are listening online, when you finish listening to this, if someone asks you about Surah Ghashiyah, you have an overall understanding of the chapter. Where is it placed in Quran? How does it start? How many ayat there are? What is the main discussion? And so on and so forth. That is the understanding. Of course, each one of these surahs, albeit they're small and they're short, 20 some ayat, but still Mufassirin have discussed volumes and volumes in regards to all of these surahs, because this is not kalam of insan, this is kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So an overview of the surah is signs of Allah in the universe, resurrection, and its specific features are mentioned. The chapter is named Ghashiyah, and as well as Hal Ataka Hadithul Ghashiyah. Now, of course, when you look at these names, primarily the purpose behind it is so that you recognize the surah. When I was memorizing, as younger kids, you start memorizing some chapters of the Quran. When you memorize, smaller chapters, and then you move towards, those chapters are a little bit longer than the small ones. You start from the beginning, of course, you don't start from the end. So the first ayah is something which gets repeated mostly, right? We all know the first ayat of Surah Baqarah, but there are 286 ayat. We don't know the remaining. But we all know the first ayat. It begins with Alif Lam Mim, Dhalik al-Kitabu la rayba fi. Because we've heard it so many times. It's placed right in the beginning of it. That ayah becomes like the face of the chapter. And similar is the case over here with Surah Ghashiyah. The very first ayah, Hal Ataka Hadithul Ghashiyah, became the name of the chapter. That this is how you recognize this chapter, which is another name for Qayamat. The resurrection will conceal all the terrible incidents. The surah has 26 verses, 92 words, and 381 letters in it. Surah Ghashiyah was revealed in Mecca after Rasulullah ascended for Miraj and before the migration to Medina. So that you have this period of about 2.5, 3 years between the first Miraj of Rasulullah, because Rasulullah had multiple Miraj, and before or after the migration, or before the migration or after that. So in between you have a few years, and that's when this surah was revealed in Mecca. It was revealed right after Surah Al-Dhariyat. Surah Ghashiyah is placed at number 88 in the current order of the chapters. So if you open up the Quran, you'll find that there's no difference in the Quran that we have in our mosque than the Qurans that are sitting in Masjid-e-Nabawi or Masjid-al-Haram or any other city in the world. They all are in the same exact order. So you'll find Surah Ghashiyah to be placed at number 88. However, chronologically speaking, this chapter is number 68 in the order of revelation. So at number 68, this chapter was revealed, although it is placed at number 88. And we've talked about other chapters, why there's a difference. There's a Quran that Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen Ali ibn Abi Talib ﷺ compiled. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa. And what is the difference in that Quran that Imam ﷺ had compiled? Well, the difference in that Quran is that Imam kept the ayat or kept the surahs in the order of revelation. He did not keep the surahs in the order that is placed currently that we have. So that is the difference of Imam's collection of Quran. So he, of course, was one of the scribers of the wahi as the wahi was coming down. So Imam wrote down the Quran, which is according to the instructions of Rasulullah to place this surah here, that surah there. But then Imam also compiled it according to the the number of surahs or the way it were revealed. It's phenomenal. This information is available to us. So just like now, I told you this surah was revealed at number 68. Like that, we have information about from the very first surah until the 114th chapter, all that were revealed in that particular order. That is something which is a common knowledge now. So the atmosphere in which the surah was revealed, considering the Meccan nature of the Surah Ghashiyah, and the ideological debates in the Meccan surah. So a lot of these surahs that were revealed in Mecca, there's a discussion of ideology. There's a discussion on the worldview of how the Tawheed basically is the main concept, and Ma'ad, returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this surah has also given good news and warnings, and its noble content show that the state of Islam and the guidance of people at that time required that this blessed surah be revealed. That the way Muslims were struggling with the boycott that was happening, at that point it required something like this to boost their morals, right? Where your team is feeling down and they see that all the odds are against them, and this is where a good coach comes in, gives a prep talk at the halftime to get the team ready to turn the events completely around. Same thing was happening. Muslims, they were struggling. They were being persecuted. They were being boycotted. At that point, they were being made weak. But this sort of chapter was needed to come down, to go ahead and revive all of that, and to rejuvenate them once again. It illuminates the complete system of this universe and the abode of humans' existence, objectives and the lessons that we can derive from this surah, that this surah revolves around the fundamental discussions of Tawheed and Ma'ad. Now that is something which you can easily guess as well. Up until now, all these chapters that we have talked about 10 or 12 chapters that we have discussed from the 30th juz of Quran, you can easily guess. If I was to ask you what was Surah Takwir was talking about, of course, you'll have to recollect your mind. But one thing you can be sure of, that it is talking about Qiyamah. Because majority of the chapters in 30 juz, the tone is about Tawheed and Qiyamah. And that's what was needed. Remember, we keep on reiterating this, that that's what was needed in the Makki life of Rasulullah. In Makkah, there was really no need for philosophical discussions. There was really no need for, the stories of the previous Anbiya. Stories of the previous Anbiya come when people are on board. There's a saying in English, when the house is on fire, you don't mow the lawn. You worry about mowing the lawn when the house fire has been put away. If the house is burning, now you're mowing the lawn. What's that going to do if the house? So you got to put out the fire first. That's what was happening in the Makki life. You got to make these people be on board the ship, like Hazrat Nuh did. If they don't board the ship, then of course his propagation and his tabligh cannot take the second page or turn the second page. So this is where we find that the two main concepts and the discussions that you find are about Tawheed and Ma'ad. As far as the contents and the topics are concerned, the surah, as we know, was revealed in Makkah. It mainly revolves around three primary discussions, or you can call it the three axes, three axes. Number one, the discussion about Ma'ad, especially the severe end and punishment of the criminals and rewards with great incentives for believers. As I said, Muslims are feeling down. You need this prep talk. So the surah comes down, Rasulullah reveals it, reads it to mu'mineen, believers, to sort of give them that confidence once again. Number two, the discussion about Tawheed by pointing out the creation of the skies, mountains, and the earth, and the interest of humans toward these creations and their hidden secrets. I'll hint toward what does that mean? The hidden secrets of the sky, the earth, and some of the animals that are being mentioned. Number three, the discussion is about Nubuwwat and some of the duties of Rasulullah as mentioned in the surah. The surah, similar to other Makki chapters, enhances the faith and beliefs. So if you're looking for the enhancement of your faith and reaffirmation of your faith, reassurance of your faith, this is the surah to refer to. Features and the specialties and the reward of reciting the surah, Ubay ibn Ka'ab narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam that whoever recited Surah Ghashiyah, Allah will ease the person's accountability. So we all know that we will be held accountable in the court of law in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you recite the surah, man sabaqat rahmatuhu ghadaba, the one whose rahmat exceeds his ghadab, Allah will make it easy for you on the day of judgment. Another way you can make things easy as far as your accountability is concerned, remember the riwayat of Ma'asum, that if you deal with people with ease, in turn Allah will deal with you with ease. So if you deal with people with toughness and difficulty, make it hard upon them, guess what? You're brewing it for yourself, that Allah will make it tough and difficult for you on the day of judgment. So if you want your accountability to be easygoing in front of Allah tomorrow, you should also be easygoing, approachable when it comes to the people. Another riwayat from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu, he said, whoever recited this surah in their obligatory or recommended prayers will receive the mercy of Allah in this life and in the hereafter. He will remain protected from the wrath of the day of judgment. Remember, the discussion in the beginning is about painting that severe torment of Qiyamah, the fiercing, boiling water and all those things. If you want to remain safeguarded from all of that, recitation of the surah in your wajib or mustahab prayers is needed. There are certain messages, I'll go through them quickly. I have about 5 to 6 minutes in my possession until namaz al-maghrib. The first is when it says, وُجُوهٍ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاعِمَةٍ. It's not na'ima, meaning sleeping. It's from na'ima with an ain. The real happiness shows up on their faces. So when they heard about these glad tidings, it really brought about a smile on their face. When someone is feeling down, like when we were going through the thick of the COVID-19, and then things eventually started easing out. The vaccine came about and people started getting vaccinated, and other business of life became easier and easier, back to normal. It brings a smile on your face. Similarly, when you have worked hard to achieve something, finally when someone tells you the results of all the hard work that you put in, it brings a smile on your face. So wujuhin yawma idhin na'ima. The real happiness shows up on the faces. The complexion of the face informs about the secrets of the conscience. So when you look at someone's face, you can learn a great deal. By looking at someone's face, you can tell a lot of things. When a person is smiling all the time, when a person is sad all the time, when a person is pale, their face is pale, when they're, have a bright smile on their face, you can tell something about them. Face tells a great deal. A lot of psychologists, they can just read the face and they can tell you an entire story behind it. So that's important, that what kind of face that you carry. Then, لِسَعْيِهَا رَاضِعَةٌ. The difficulty in this world is transient. So that is also a promise by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That will also bring what? Happiness to your face. That the difficulty that you're going through right now, you're struggling physically, financially, spiritually, all this is transient. It'll pass. And then eventually, it'll turn the page on you. But it brings happiness and permanent success in the hereafter. So you might face difficulty here, but in turn, it'll provide what? It'll provide, permanent success over there. لا تسمع فيها لاغية. This is in Qiyamah, in paradise. What will you not see in paradise? Those who refrain from vain talks and actions in this world will enjoy a life without abrogation in the hereafter. There will not be any laghv in the hereafter. But if you indulge in love over here, then of course you will face something similar over there. I thought ayat number 17 to 20 very quickly is there to basically awaken our conscience. If you look at ayat number 17, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ. 4 things are being mentioned. Ayat number 17 says, have they not looked at camel and how it's created? How the heavens are raised up high? How the mountains are set firm? And how the earth is spread out? Apparently, these are just 4 ayat. It's like, what's so important about them? I said, these 4 phenomena, if the spirit of thinking is in mankind, then all existence is a classroom for us. You don't need to, well, you should attend school and colleges, but after you're graduated, this world, every room, every place you visit is like a classroom for you. You can learn a great deal. When you walk out in professional life, when you walk out, amongst the people, when you travel to different places, what are you doing? You're gaining knowledge. You're learning. As long as the spirit of thinking is alive, then the entire existence becomes a classroom for us. A shepherd, too, in the desert is as if he is in the biggest libraries in the world. A shepherd who's minding his own business with his cattle and with his livestock walking around. Over there, if his mind is illuminated and thinking gear is on, then it is as if he's in the biggest library of the world. That's how much he can learn from it. Under the feet is the earth. Above the head is the sky. Around him are mountains, and in front of him are camels. This man, nomad, living over there. If he pays heed to every one of these phenomena, he can discover many secrets that God has created. For example, a camel runs faster than a horse and carries more loads than a donkey. Among the animals, some are used for riding, some are used for their meat, and some for milk, but camel can be used for all of the above. It does all of these things. Its eyelids are resistant to wind and desert soil. It stores fat and food in its hump and is resistant to hunger, which is obviously needed in long journeys in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a desert. It stores water in its body and is resistant to thirst as well. He knows the way. You let the camel loose, knows the way how to get around. He is so tame that hundreds of camels surrender to one commander. You don't need 100 different commanders, running 100 different camels. One commander can tame all of them together. As the Arabs say, the camel is the ship of the desert. It is the strongest, least expensive, most useful, and the calmest and the most tolerant of the animals. Guess why? That's why the Arabs were so fond of camels. In fact, they had all these different names for different camels. When a camel was 1 year old, there was a different name. When it was a 2-year-old, there was a different name. 3-year-old, there was a different name. 4-year-old, there are different names. And if you go into the chapter about zakat of camels, you'll find all of these different names that are mentioned. That's why Amirul Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, sallallahu Muhammad, and I'm almost out of my time, it refers to as Ibn Laboon. The camel, be like that camel, which is only a couple of years old, in the time of fitna. Why? Because you can't ride it, nor can you use its milk. It's so young right now. It's got to be a certain age before it starts producing milk, and it's got to be a certain age before you can start loading on top of it. So Imam said, in the time of fitna, be like Ibn Laboon. It does not say camel. Like that camel which is of that age, so that you don't side with either of the two parties. The creation of the skies and the mountains and earth is not accidental. Rather, all of that is created with a wise strategic planning. There is value to each of these favors of God. In camels, there is unique creation. In the sky is high, the earth is widespread, and the mountains are firmly placed. And that is why these four are being given reference in this chapter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and ability to be able to ponder over the ayat of Quran, chapter Ghashiyah, surah number 88. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our weighted Imam and make us amongst the helpers and the soldiers of Imam. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Azan.